Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the battleship Defiance and watched his world burn. Earth turned slowly below them like a dying coal, its surface covered in flames that could be seen from space. The blue oceans had turned black with smoke, and the green continents glowed red with fire. This was not how humanity was supposed to end. The Zephyrian fleet hung in space around Earth like hungry wolves around a wounded deer. Their ships were massive and dark, shaped like twisted knives that cut through the void. Each one was 3 times larger than the biggest human warship, and they had hundreds of them. The aliens had been planning this attack for years while humanity thought they were safe behind their defenses. Morrison gripped the railing of his command platform as another explosion rocked the Defiance. The ship groaned and shuddered around him like a wounded animal. Warning lights flashed red across every surface, and the air tasted of smoke and fear. His crew worked frantically at their stations, but Morrison could see the truth in their eyes. They were losing this war, and they all knew it. Amy Santos sat at the pilot controls with her hands dancing across the navigation system. She was the best pilot in the human fleet, and she had kept them alive through 6 hours of running battles. Her uniform was torn and there was blood on her forehead, but her hands never shook as she guided their ship through the enemy fire. Carl Hudson worked at the engineering station trying to keep their engines running while the ship fell apart around them. He had been fixing impossible problems all day, but even his skills had limits. Lisa Carter monitored the communication channels, and her face was pale with the news she received. Every human colony was under attack, and most had already fallen silent. Mars base had gone dark 3 hours ago, and the Jupiter stations were sending desperate pleas for help that would never come. The Zephyrian Empire had struck everywhere at once, and humanity had no time to fight back or even run away. The enemy had come from the dark spaces between the stars, where no human had ever traveled. They called themselves the Zephyrian Empire, and they were led by reptilian creatures called the Vorthak, who stood 9 feet tall and had scales like black metal. 12 different alien species served under their banner, and they all shared one goal. They wanted to wipe humanity from the galaxy completely. Morrison had been fighting in space for 20 years, and he had never seen anything like this attack. The aliens used weapons that turned matter into energy and shields that bent space itself. Their tactics were perfect, and their technology was far beyond anything humans had developed. It was like watching children fight against gods. The Defiance shook again as enemy fire found their hull. Morrison felt the deck plates buckle under his feet, and heard the distant sound of atmosphere rushing out through holes in their armor. They had started this battle with 300 crew members, but now only 12 people remained alive. The rest were floating in space or buried under twisted metal in the lower decks. Amy turned from her controls with tears in her eyes and said the words Morrison had been dreading. The engines were failing, and they had maybe 10 minutes before. Complete power loss. The life support systems were running on backup power, and the artificial gravity was already flickering. Carl confirmed that the fusion reactor was damaged beyond repair, and they could not jump to light speed anymore. Morrison looked at his remaining crew, and saw the faces of people who had fought bravely but could fight no longer. They were exhausted and wounded, and their ship was dying around them. In the distance, he could see the last evacuation ships fleeing Earth with whatever refugees they could carry. Those lucky few might survive to find new homes among the stars. But most of humanity would die today. Dr. Captain made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He ordered his crew to abandon ship and head for the escape pods while he remained behind. Someone had to stay and detonate the fusion core manually, or the Zephyrians would capture their ship and learn human technology. It was not much of a victory, but it was all he could give his people. Amy refused to leave at first, and Carl argued that they could all escape together. Lisa begged him to come with them and promised they would find another way to fight. But Morrison knew the truth. The war was over and humanity had lost. The best he could do was make sure the aliens paid a price for their victory. As his crew reluctantly headed for the escape pods, Morrison discovered something strange in the ship's damaged computer core. Hidden beneath layers of security codes was a set of coordinates that led to a place called Project Terminus. The file was marked with the highest classification levels, and it had been placed there by someone with authority Morrison did not recognize. The coordinates pointed to empty space between galaxies where no human had ever traveled. Morrison copied the data to his personal escape pod just as the Zephyrian ships closed in for the final attack. He set the fusion core to overload and ran for his pod as explosions began tearing the Defiance apart. Behind him, Earth died in nuclear fire, and ahead lay only darkness and the faint hope that somewhere in the void he might find a way to make the aliens pay for what they had done to his people. Morrison's escape pod drifted through the endless black between galaxies like a tiny metal coffin. 6 months had passed since Earth died, and he had been alone in the dark for all of that time. The pod was designed to keep one person alive for 30 days, but Morrison had stretched that to half a year through careful rationing and desperate repairs. The emergency food ran out after 5 weeks, and Morrison survived on whatever he could find in the maintenance compartments. Protein bars meant for emergencies became his daily meals, and he learned to make water last by recycling every drop. The pod's life support systems wheezed and groaned as they struggled to keep him breathing, and the air grew stale and thin with each passing day. Sleep became his enemy because it brought dreams of Earth burning and the screams of his crew as the Defiance died around them. Morrison would wake in cold sweats with his hands shaking and his heart pounding against his ribs. Sometimes he thought he could hear Amy calling his name or see Carl working at his engineering station, but when he turned to look, he found only empty space and blinking lights. The pod sensors showed nothing but darkness in every direction. No stars and no planets and no signs of life anywhere within 1,000 light years. Morrison began to wonder if the coordinates he found were real or just random numbers that would lead him to die alone in the void he had gambled his life on. A secret that might not even exist. By the 4th month, Morrison was talking to himself just to hear a human voice. He told stories about his childhood on Earth and sang songs his mother had taught him when he was young. The pod's computer became his only companion, and he programmed it to respond with different voices, just so he could pretend he was not completely alone in the universe. Food became so scarce that Morrison ate the pod's emergency rations one small bite at a time to make them last longer. His stomach cramped with hunger and his body grew weak from malnutrition, but he refused to give up. Somewhere ahead in the darkness was Project Terminus, and Morrison would reach it or die trying. He had lost everything else, and this was his last hope for revenge against the aliens who destroyed his world. The pod's navigation system was damaged in the escape from Earth, and Morrison had to plot his course manually using star charts that were centuries out of date. He calculated and recalculated his position using mathematics he remembered from the Naval Academy, while the pod's engines coughed and sputtered on the last drops of fuel. When the sensors finally detected something artificial hidden in a massive asteroid field, Morrison thought he was hallucinating from oxygen deprivation. The structure was enormous and clearly not natural, but it looked nothing like human architecture. Curved walls and organic shapes suggested it had been grown rather than built, and strange symbols covered its hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Morrison's pod had barely enough power left to reach the structure, and docking proved almost impossible with his damaged systems. The artificial gravity in the docking bay caught his pod and pulled it inside, where mechanical arms locked onto his hull with gentle precision. Whoever had built this place was far more advanced than humanity had ever been. The airlock cycled open to reveal a corridor that stretched away into dim blue light. The air was breathable and warm, and it tasted clean after months of breathing recycled atmosphere. Morrison stumbled out of his pod on unsteady legs and found himself in a place that defied explanation. The walls seemed to pulse with their own inner light, and the floor felt warm beneath his feet. A voice spoke from hidden speakers in perfect English and welcomed him to Project Terminus. The voice belonged to an artificial intelligence that called itself Oracle, and it knew Morrison's name and rank and service record. Oracle explained that the facility had been waiting for him specifically, and that his arrival had been predicted. Years before the war even began, the corridors led Morrison deeper into the station, where he found laboratories and workshops filled with technology he had never seen before. Machines hummed with quiet power and displays showed information in languages both human and alien. This was clearly a research facility, but one that had been operating in secret for far longer than Morrison could imagine. Oracle guided Morrison to a medical bay where a woman lay sleeping in a cryogenic pod. The nameplate read Dr. Helen Price, and her file showed she had been the lead researcher at Project Terminus for over 200 years. She had gone into suspended animation to wait for someone exactly like Morrison to arrive and continue her work. The revival process took several hours, and Morrison watched as Dr. Price slowly returned to consciousness. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through him. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse from centuries of sleep, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She knew about Earth's destruction and the fall of the human colonies because Oracle had been monitoring subspace communications. Dr. Price explained that Project Terminus was humanity's most classified research program dedicated to pushing human evolution beyond its natural limits. The facility had been hidden in the void between galaxies to keep it safe from alien discovery, and it housed technologies that could enhance human capabilities far beyond anything the Zephyrian Empire had encountered. The enhancement process had never been tested on a living subject because it was too dangerous and too irreversible. Dr. Price showed Morrison laboratories, filled with genetic modification equipment and cybernetic implants and neural processors that could rewrite a person's entire biology. The process would either kill him or transform him into something the galaxy had never seen before. Morrison learned that the facility also contained a prototype warship called the Vengeance that was designed to be operated by a single enhanced human. The ship's systems could respond to neural commands faster than any traditional crew could manage, and its weapons used technology reverse engineered from a dozen different alien species. Dr. Price looked at Morrison with sad eyes and explained that the enhancement process was irreversible and would change him in ways that went far beyond the physical. He would gain incredible abilities, but he might lose his humanity in the process. The choice was his to make, but once he began, there would be no going back to the person he used to be. Morrison thought about Earth burning and his crew dying and the millions of humans who had been murdered by the Zephyrian Empire. He had come this far and sacrificed everything to find a way to fight back. With nothing left to lose and the weight of his species' extinction on his shoulders, Morrison made his choice and volunteered for the procedure that would either kill him or make him into humanity's ultimate weapon. The enhancement chamber looked like a metal coffin filled with needles and wires that would pierce Morrison's body in 100 different places. Dr. Price explained each step of the process as she prepared the machines that would tear him apart and rebuild him into something new. The genetic modification would rewrite his DNA at the cellular level, while cybernetic implants integrated with his nervous system and bones were reinforced with materials harder than diamond. Morrison lay down in the chamber and felt the cold metal against his skin as restraints locked him in place. Dr. Price's hands shook slightly as she activated the systems, and Morrison could see the fear in her eyes. She had designed this process but never seen it used on a living person, and she knew that the next 3 weeks would either create a weapon capable of fighting the Zephyrian Empire or result in Morrison's horrible death. The pain began immediately as microscopic machines entered Morrison's bloodstream and started changing him from the inside out. Every cell in his body burned as his genetic code was rewritten and new structures were built within his muscles and organs. Morrison screamed until his voice gave out and then screamed silently as the machines continued their work. Neural implants drilled into Morrison's skull with precise, mechanical motions that sent lightning through his brain. Quantum processors were grafted directly onto his nervous system, and his thoughts became confused as new pathways formed between his neurons. Morrison could feel his mind expanding and changing as the computers merged with his consciousness and gave him access to processing power beyond human comprehension. Dr. Price monitored Morrison's vital signs from outside the chamber, as his heart stopped and started again multiple times during the first week. His brain activity spiked to dangerous levels and then dropped to almost nothing as the neural modifications rewrote his thought patterns. She watched the readings with growing concern because the process was more violent than her computer models had predicted. During the second week, Morrison's bones were dissolved and regrown with synthetic materials that made them stronger than steel while remaining light enough to allow normal movement. His muscles were enhanced with artificial fibers that could contract with tremendous force, and his reflexes were accelerated by a factor of 50. Through modifications to his spinal cord and brainstem, Morrison experienced visions during the enhancement process that seemed more real than the laboratory around him. He saw the first humans walking across African plains millions of years ago and felt their determination to survive against impossible odds. He witnessed the colonization of Mars and the first journeys to other star systems as humanity spread across the galaxy with stubborn refusal to be stopped by any obstacle. The visions showed Morrison the courage and determination that had defined his species since its earliest days on Earth. Humans had faced extinction before, and always found a way to adapt and overcome their enemies through intelligence and willpower. These memories became Morrison's anchor as his body and mind were torn apart and rebuilt, according to Dr. Price's designs. By the third week, Morrison's transformation was nearly complete, but the final stages were the most dangerous. His circulatory system was enhanced with artificial components that could pump blood faster than any natural heart, while his lungs were modified to extract oxygen more efficiently from thin atmospheres. His eyes were replaced with cybernetic versions that could see across multiple spectrums, and his hearing was enhanced to detect sounds far beyond human range. Dr. Price watched Morrison's body change shape as his new muscle fibers developed and his enhanced skeleton settled into its final configuration. He grew taller and broader as his frame adapted to accommodate the modifications, and his skin took on a slight metallic sheen from the nanomachines that now flowed through his bloodstream. The most important enhancement was the neural interface that would allow Morrison to control technology through thought alone. Quantum computers grafted onto his brain could process information at superhuman speeds and communicate directly with any electronic system. Morrison would be able to pilot ships and operate weapons faster than any traditional crew could manage. When Morrison finally emerged from the enhancement chamber after 3 weeks of agony, he was no longer entirely human. His reaction time had increased by a factor of 50, and his strength had been amplified beyond measurement, while his mind could process information at speeds that made normal human thoughts seem slow and clumsy. Most importantly, his new neural implants allowed him to interface directly with any technology and understand its operation through pure mental contact. Dr. Price ran tests on Morrison's new abilities and found that his physical capabilities exceeded every projection from her computer models. He could lift objects weighing several tons and move faster than human eyes could follow, while his enhanced brain could solve complex mathematical problems in seconds. The quantum processors in his skull gave him access to processing power that rivaled the station's main computer. Morrison discovered that his new senses allowed him to perceive the world in ways that normal humans could never experience. He could see radio waves and magnetic fields and hear conversations taking place on the other side of the station. His enhanced reflexes made everything around him seem to move in slow motion, and he had to concentrate to avoid moving so fast that Dr. Price could not follow his actions. The transformation had been successful, but it came with a terrible price. Morrison could feel the distance growing between himself and his humanity as his enhanced mind processed emotions and memories differently than before. He was becoming something new and powerful, but he was also becoming something that could never again be truly human. Dr. Price showed Morrison the prototype warship Vengeance that waited in the station's hidden docking bay. The ship had been designed specifically for an enhanced human operator, and its systems were far beyond anything the Zephyrian Empire had encountered. Weapons could fire at the speed of thought, and shields could adapt to any attack, while engines could accelerate the ship faster than physics should have allowed. Morrison placed his hand on the ship's control interface and felt his consciousness merge with the vessel's computer systems. The Vengeance became an extension of his own body, and he could control every function through neural commands that traveled faster than any manual operation. He was no longer just a pilot, but something entirely new that existed as both man and machine. Oracle sensors detected Zephyrian reconnaissance probes, approaching their location as the Empire began searching for any remaining human survivors. Morrison realized that his time for preparation was over and that he would soon face the aliens who had destroyed his world. He was no longer the man who had escaped Earth 6 months ago, but something far more dangerous that the Zephyrian Empire had never encountered before. Morrison felt the Vengeance respond to his thoughts as he guided the ship away from Project Terminus just as Zephyrian scout vessels emerged from hyperspace. The enemy ships moved in perfect formation like a pack of hunting predators, but they had no idea what they were about to encounter. Morrison's enhanced reflexes processed their attack patterns in milliseconds, while his neural implants fed targeting data directly into his consciousness. The Zephyrian scouts expected to find either empty space or helpless human refugees hiding in the asteroid field. Instead, they faced something that defied their understanding of human capabilities. Morrison's ship moved with impossible grace as it phased through their weapons, fire using experimental displacement technology that bent space around the Vengeance's hull. The first alien ship died before its crew realized they were under attack. Morrison's weapons fired at the speed of thought and tore through the enemy's shields like they were made of paper. The scout vessel exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up the asteroid field and sent debris spinning away into the darkness. The remaining Zephyrian ships immediately changed formation and began broadcasting emergency signals to their fleet. Morrison felt a cold satisfaction as he destroyed the second enemy ship with a single precise shot that penetrated their reactor core. His enhanced mind calculated trajectories and weapon yields with perfect accuracy, while his cybernetic reflexes allowed him to dodge return fire that would have destroyed any normal human pilot. The Vengeance danced between enemy weapons like a leaf in the wind. The Zephyrian commanders tried to use their superior numbers to overwhelm Morrison, but their conventional tactics were useless against his enhanced abilities. He could predict their movements before they made them, and his ship's advanced systems allowed him to fight at speeds that made the enemy appear to move in slow motion. Within minutes, half of the alien scout force had been reduced to burning wreckage. Morrison used the Vengeance's cloaking system to vanish from enemy sensors, before reappearing behind the remaining ships and destroying them with calculated precision. Each kill was clean and efficient as his enhanced mind processed the battle like a complex mathematical equation. The aliens fought bravely, but they were facing something far beyond their experience or technology. The last Zephyrian scout managed to transmit Morrison's location to the Empire before Morrison's final shot turned it into expanding plasma. The battle had lasted only 6 minutes, but Morrison knew that a full battle fleet would soon arrive to investigate. He had announced his presence to the galaxy, and there would be no more hiding in the shadows. Morrison returned to Project Terminus. Knowing that he could not stay long, Dr. Price met him in the docking bay with tears in her eyes, because she understood what had to happen next. The facility contained too many secrets to risk capture by the Zephyrian Empire, and Morrison could not defend it against an entire fleet by himself. They worked together to download the station's research data into the Vengeance's computers while Oracle prepared the facility for self-destruction. Centuries of scientific advancement and technological breakthroughs would die with the station, but their knowledge would live on in Morrison's enhanced mind and his ship's databanks. Dr. Price refused Morrison's offer to evacuate her to safety, because she could not bear to leave the work that had defined her entire life. She chose to remain with Project Terminus as it burned rather than flee to an uncertain future among the stars. Morrison understood her decision, but it still hurt to leave another friend behind to die. The Zephyrian battle fleet arrived just as Morrison launched the Vengeance away from the exploding station. Terminus died in nuclear fire that could be seen across several star systems, while Morrison disappeared into hyperspace with the aliens in pursuit. He had gained incredible power, but lost the last connection to his old life as a normal human being. Morrison began a one-man war against the Zephyrian empire using tactics that exploited every weakness in their military structure. He struck at supply convoys that carried food and weapons to alien colonies and destroyed communication relays that coordinated their fleet movements. His enhanced abilities allowed him to outthink and outfight enemies that would overwhelm entire human battle groups. The vengeance became a ghost that haunted Zephyrion space as Morrison attacked isolated outposts and then vanished before reinforcements could arrive. He learned to use the ship's advanced sensors to map enemy patrol routes and identify high-value targets that would cause maximum disruption to their war effort. Each successful raid made the aliens more desperate to find and destroy him. Word of the mysterious lone warrior spread throughout the Empire as Morrison's attacks grew bolder and more devastating. Alien crews began to fear assignments to remote sectors where the ghost ship might appear without warning. Some called him a demon, while others believed he was the vengeful spirit of humanity itself returned to punish them for their crimes. Emperor Zektar received reports of the attacks with growing fury because no single human should have been capable of such destruction. The reptilian ruler of the Vorthag had personally overseen humanity's extinction, and he refused to believe that one survivor could threaten his vast empire. He ordered his best admirals to hunt down Morrison and bring him his head as proof that humanity was truly dead. Morrison discovered that the Empire's propaganda about human extinction was not entirely accurate. Hidden across the galaxy in slave camps and refugee settlements were thousands of his people who had somehow survived the initial attack. Using the Vengeance's advanced sensors, Morrison began locating these survivors and planning daring rescue missions that would free them from alien captivity. The first rescue operation took place at a mining colony, where 300 humans worked as slaves in radioactive tunnels that would kill them within months. Morrison infiltrated the facility using his ship's cloaking systems and systematically eliminated the alien guards before freeing the prisoners. The humans looked at him with mixture of awe and fear because his enhanced appearance made him seem more machine than man. Morrison established a hidden base in an abandoned star system using ancient orbital platforms that he repaired with his advanced technical knowledge. The rescued humans helped him expand the facility while former military officers began organizing the survivors into an effective resistance movement. For the first time since Earth's destruction, Morrison was no longer completely alone in his war against the aliens. Colonel Steve Parker had been a prisoner for 8 months before. Morrison rescued him from a Zephyrian interrogation center. The older man took charge of training the civilian refugees for combat, while Morrison planned increasingly ambitious raids against Empire installations. Captain Nina Brooks organized supply runs and intelligence-gathering operations that provided vital information about enemy movements and weaknesses. Morrison's guerrilla campaign escalated as he targeted increasingly important Zephyrian installations. He destroyed their primary shipyard at Kepler 442 and assassinated Admiral Vekvar during a diplomatic summit between member species. Each victory came at great personal cost as Morrison struggled with the isolation of his enhanced existence and the growing distance between himself and the people he fought to protect. 6 months after his first rescue mission, Morrison had freed nearly 10,000 human survivors from across the galaxy. His hidden base had grown into a small city built within the ancient orbital platforms of a dead star system. The survivors worked together to repair damaged sections and expand their living space, while former military officers trained civilian refugees to fight against their alien oppressors. Colonel Steve Parker commanded the growing resistance movement, with the skill of a veteran soldier who had fought in dozens of battles before Earth's fall. His weathered face showed the strain of organizing desperate people into an effective fighting force, but his determination never wavered. Captain Nina Brooks managed supply operations and intelligence gathering with efficiency that impressed even Morrison's enhanced mind. Morrison felt the weight of leadership settling on his shoulders as more survivors looked to him for hope and direction. His enhanced appearance made him seem godlike to people who had lost everything and survived on nothing but stubborn human courage. Children who had never seen their homeworld called him the Ghost Warrior, and adults whispered that he was humanity's avenging angel sent to punish the aliens. The rescued humans looked at Morrison with mixture of awe and fear because his cybernetic enhancements made him appear more machine than man. His eyes glowed with faint blue light from the quantum processors behind them, and his movements carried the fluid precision of perfectly calibrated machinery. Dr. Sandra Kim worked as the base psychologist and helped Morrison maintain his connection to his humanity while dealing with the isolation of his transformation. Morrison's raids against Zephyrian installations had grown bolder and more devastating as his tactical abilities improved through constant combat. He destroyed the Empire's primary research facility on Vega Prime and stole classified information about their military technology and strategic planning. Each successful attack made the aliens more desperate to capture or kill the lone human who dared to challenge their supremacy. The Vengeance had been upgraded with technology salvaged from destroyed alien ships, and Morrison's enhanced technical knowledge allowed him to integrate systems that should have been incompatible. His ship now carried weapons from 6 different species and defensive systems that adapted to any attack pattern. The vessel had become a hybrid of human ingenuity and alien science that defied conventional understanding. Emperor Zektar received daily reports of Morrison's activities with growing rage because no single being should have been capable of such widespread destruction. The reptilian ruler had conquered 12 species and built an empire that spanned half the galaxy but one enhanced human threatened to unravel everything he had achieved. His admirals feared to give him bad news, and his scientists claimed that Morrison's abilities were impossible. Intelligence gathered during Morrison's raids revealed that the Zephyrian Empire was developing a superweapon called the Reality Anchor that would ensure no trace of human civilization could ever be recovered. The device could erase genetic patterns from existence itself and make it impossible for any species to evolve along human lines. Emperor Zektar planned to use the weapon to remove humanity from the universe permanently. Morrison realized that his guerrilla campaign could not stop a weapon of such magnitude, no matter how many ships he destroyed or bases he captured. The Reality Anchor represented an existential threat, not just to the surviving humans, but to the very possibility of humanity's future evolution. He would have to do something impossible and take on the entire Zephyrian Empire in direct battle to prevent the weapon's deployment. The base's workshops buzzed with activity as human engineers worked to upgrade Morrison's equipment and weapons using technology stolen from alien installations. They built new armor for the resistance fighters and improved communication systems that allowed coordination between scattered cells. Morrison's enhanced intellect allowed him to solve engineering problems that had puzzled the best human scientists. For decades, Morrison began experiencing strange dreams, where he saw possible futures for humanity spreading across the galaxy in ways that seemed almost prophetic. His enhanced neural processors were making connections and calculations that went beyond normal human consciousness, and he started to understand patterns in galactic history that revealed the true scope of the conflict he was fighting. The resistance movement had grown to include humans from dozens of different worlds who brought knowledge of local conditions and alien weaknesses. Former asteroid miners knew how to navigate dangerous debris fields, while merchant spacers understood trade routes that could be used for covert operations. Morrison coordinated their efforts with tactical precision that maximized every advantage. Captain Brooks brought Morrison intelligence about a massive Zephyrian fleet gathering near the galactic core where the Reality Anchor was being prepared for deployment. Over 3,000 warships representing all 12 member species of the Empire were assembling under Emperor Zektar's personal command. The alien ruler had decided to end Morrison's campaign by bringing overwhelming force to bear against any target he might attack. Morrison studied the intelligence reports with his enhanced mind processing tactical scenarios at superhuman speed. The enemy fleet was too large to engage directly, but it also represented an opportunity to strike a decisive blow against the Empire's leadership. If he could destroy the Reality Anchor and eliminate Emperor Zektar, the alien coalition might fragment into competing factions. Dr. Kim worked with Morrison to prepare him mentally for what might be his final mission because the psychological strain of his enhancements was beginning to show. He had trouble relating to normal humans and sometimes seemed to forget that he had once been one of them. His enhanced intellect processed emotions differently, and he struggled to maintain the empathy that had once driven him to protect his people. The survivors in the hidden base began making preparations for life without Morrison because they all understood that his planned attack on the reality anchor was essentially a suicide mission. Colonel Parker organized defensive plans and evacuation procedures while Captain Brooks established contact with other resistance cells scattered across the galaxy. If Morrison failed, they would continue the fight using the knowledge and weapons he had provided. Morrison spent his final night on the base, walking through the residential sections where human families had rebuilt their lives after losing everything to alien conquest. Children played games in corridors that had once been empty metal tubes while their parents worked to create a new society from the ashes of the old. These people represented humanity's future, and Morrison would sacrifice everything to ensure they had a chance to grow and prosper. The Vengeance was loaded with every weapon and piece of equipment the base could spare, while Morrison's neural implants were updated with the latest tactical data about Zephyrian fleet formations and defensive systems. His enhanced body was pushed to its physical limits as combat stimulants and performance enhancers prepared him for a battle that would determine the fate of his entire species. Morrison said goodbye to the people who had become his friends and fellow warriors, knowing that he would probably never see them again. Colonel Parker saluted him with military precision, while Dr. Kim squeezed his hand and reminded him that he was still human despite all the mechanical parts. Captain Brooks wished him luck and promised to take care of the survivors if he did not return. As Morrison launched the Vengeance toward the galactic core where the Zephyrian fleet waited, he carried with him the hopes and prayers of every human still alive in the galaxy. He was no longer just fighting for revenge against the aliens who had destroyed Earth, but for the right of his species to exist and evolve and spread among the stars as they were meant to do. Morrison's plan was so audacious that even his enhanced mind questioned whether it could succeed. 3,000 Zephyrian warships formed a defensive sphere around the reality anchor's deployment site, while their most powerful dreadnoughts guarded the weapon itself. Emperor Zektar commanded the fleet from his flagship Dominator, which carried enough firepower to crack a planet's surface and turn continents into molten glass. The Vengeance approached the massive alien fleet using advanced cloaking systems that bent light and energy around the ship's hull. Morrison's enhanced senses allowed him to navigate between patrol routes and sensor sweeps with precision that would have been impossible for any normal human pilot. His neural implants processed enemy communication frequencies and tactical data. While calculating attack vectors for maximum damage, Morrison had spent weeks studying the fleet's formation and identifying critical weaknesses in their defensive pattern. The Zephyrian commanders relied on overwhelming numbers and superior technology, but they had never faced an opponent who could think and react faster than their computers could process information. Their tactical doctrine assumed enemies would follow predictable attack patterns. The battle began when Morrison destroyed the fleet's primary command ship with a single devastating strike that turned the massive vessel into expanding plasma. The explosion sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian formation as ships collided with debris and communication networks went offline. Morrison had eliminated their central coordination in the first seconds of combat. What followed was the most spectacular space battle in galactic history, as one enhanced human in a prototype warship faced 3,000 enemy vessels in direct combat. Morrison's ship moved through the alien formation like a deadly ghost that appeared and vanished without warning. His weapons fired at impossible angles using targeting systems that predicted enemy movements before they happened. Morrison systematically dismantled the Zephyrian fleet using tactics that exploited every weakness in their formations and technology. He turned their own ships against each other by hacking into their targeting computers and used their weapons to create cascading explosions that destroyed entire squadrons. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to fight at speeds that made the enemy appear frozen in time. The Vengeance's experimental displacement drive allowed Morrison to phase through solid matter and attack from directions that defied physics. He materialized inside enemy formations and destroyed ships from within their defensive perimeters, before vanishing again into dimensional space. The alien crews could not comprehend how he moved through their shields and armor, as if they did not exist. Emperor Zektar watched in growing horror as his invincible fleet was torn apart by a single opponent, who seemed to be everywhere at once. Morrison's tactical brilliance was beyond anything the reptilian ruler had encountered in centuries of conquest, and his ship's technology surpassed even the Empire's most advanced weapon systems. The human was fighting like a force of nature unleashed upon the galaxy. Morrison felt the familiar cold satisfaction as he destroyed ship after ship with calculated precision, while his enhanced mind processed the battle like an incredibly complex mathematical equation. Each enemy vessel represented variables and solutions that his quantum processors solved faster than organic brains could think. He was no longer just a pilot, but a living weapon designed for this exact purpose. The surviving humans monitored the battle from their hidden base through long-range sensors that could barely penetrate the interference from thousands of exploding ships. They watched in amazement as Morrison single-handedly dismantled the largest fleet in galactic history, while demonstrating that humanity's warrior spirit could not be extinguished by any force in the universe. Children who had never seen their homeworld cheered as the ghost warrior proved that their species would not go quietly into extinction. Adults who had lost everything to alien conquest wept with joy as Morrison showed the galaxy that humans could overcome any obstacle through courage and determination. His battle became a symbol of everything that made humanity special. Morrison's enhanced body began showing signs of strain as the prolonged combat pushed his cybernetic systems beyond their design limits. Neural processors overheated from constant use, and his artificial muscle fibers started developing microfractures from repeated stress. He ignored the warning signals and continued fighting because stopping meant certain death for every human still alive. Emperor Zektar realized that his conventional forces could not defeat Morrison and made the desperate decision to activate the reality anchor prematurely. The superweapon began tearing at the fabric of space itself as it prepared to erase human genetic patterns from existence. Energy discharges from the device interfered with ship systems and made accurate targeting almost impossible. Morrison felt the reality anchor's effects as the weapon began unraveling the quantum foundations of local spacetime. His enhanced senses detected the terrible energies building within the device, and his tactical processors calculated that he had only minutes before the weapon achieved full activation. If it fired successfully, then humanity would be erased from the universe permanently. The climactic moment arrived when Morrison made the ultimate sacrifice that defined everything humanity represented. He piloted the Vengeance directly into the reality anchor's core while using his ship's experimental displacement drive to create a controlled dimensional collapse. The resulting explosion would destroy both the superweapon and the remainder of the Zephyrian fleet. Morrison's neural implants began failing one by one as energy feedback from the reality anchor overloaded his cybernetic systems. He felt his enhanced consciousness fragmenting as quantum processors shut down and artificial neurons burned out under impossible electrical loads. His body was dying, but his mind remained focused on completing the mission that would save his species. In his final moments, Morrison transmitted a message to the hidden human base containing coordinates to abandoned worlds suitable for colonization and technical specifications for rebuilding their civilization. Most importantly, he sent proof that humanity could overcome any obstacle through courage and determination, and that their story was far from over despite the Empire's attempts at genocide. The explosion that destroyed the reality anchor could be seen across multiple star systems as Morrison's sacrifice eliminated both the superweapon and Emperor Zektar's flagship. The dimensional collapse created a brief, artificial black hole that consumed the remaining Zephyrian ships before dissipating into quantum foam. Morrison died as he had lived in those final months, fighting alone among the stars. The Vengeance drifted powerless through the debris field as Morrison's life support systems finally failed and his enhanced body shut down permanently. He had given everything to ensure his species survived, and his sacrifice would be remembered for as long as humans existed anywhere in the galaxy. The last human warrior had fallen, but his legacy ensured that humanity's future remained possible. 50. Years later, thriving human colonies spread across the galaxy as the species rebuilt from the ashes of near extinction. A massive monument to Jake Morrison stood on New Terra, where humanity's new capital city rose toward the stars. Children learned his story in schools, and his name became synonymous with the indomitable human spirit that refuses to surrender regardless of the odds. The galaxy had learned that humanity could not be easily destroyed, and that sometimes it only takes one person willing to stand alone against impossible enemies to change the course of history forever. Morrison's sacrifice had broken the Zephyrian Empire and given his people the chance to grow strong again among the distant stars where their ancestors had always dreamed of traveling.